Hello, everyone, and welcome to session 1 of our virtual Marine Money Hong Kong Ship Finance Forum. Although we would have loved to be in Hong Kong and to be seeing you all in person, in times like these, we have no other choice but to resume our networking and intelligence sharing online. I am your host, Andrew Oates, and today I have the real privilege to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Captain Bjorn Hojgaard. Bjorn is the CEO of Anglo-Eastern Univan Group, a leading independent ship manager with over 600 vessels under full technical management worldwide. Captain Hojgaard is also the chairman of the Hong Kong Shipowners Association, a council member of INTERTANKO, chairman of the Maritime and Port Development Committee under the Hong Kong Maritime and Port Board, a member of the Hong Kong Trade Development Council's Logistics Services Advisory Committee, and a general committee member of the Sailors' Home and the Mission to Seafarers in Hong Kong. Bjorn, please.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to see so many friends and colleagues here, although it's online. I guess we're all pretty fed up with COVID-19 by now and hope the situation will soon return to what we used to think was normal. I wish I could strike a lighter note in what I'm about to tell you, but the reality is that the challenges facing us are bigger than I can remember in my soon 35 years in shipping. Now, after accepting the chairmanship of the Hong Kong Shipowners Association in November last year, I can look back at almost my first year as chairman, a year that's turned out very differently than I imagined. It hasn't been easy. The COVID-19 pandemic has generated fear in Hong Kong and around the world, and it's completely disrupted our lives. It was a true black swan event, one I think none of us were expecting. Add to that an already difficult geopolitical situation, initially with the trade war between US and China, which later morphed into a real power struggle for global or regional hegemony. I can't help but wonder, is it the world's old superpower, the US, and the ascendant China with its rapid growth and newfound confidence in a dance around a new world order yet to come into focus? Whatever it is, Hong Kong seems to have been the conduit in the global tensions that have played out over the past couple of years, with social unrest filling the headlines last year, and the new national security law enacted this year, bringing out pundits on both sides of the argument. Coronavirus, geopolitics, and local unrest are not just occurrences, they are actually turbulence. The shipping community has certainly not been immune to this turbulence. We, too, are facing myriad problems related specifically to our industry. We are now struggling with the new normal of uncertainty and volatility. We have no choice but to live with them or leave this industry. And as you are here today, I presume that, like me, you intend to stay, not to leave. So I'd like to thank Marine Money for giving me this platform. And I'd like today to make 3 appeals: for leadership, for partnership, and for fellowship. First, I appeal for leadership. We need leadership. We need individual and government leadership at this most critical time for Hong Kong. Hong Kong has always been a very strong international maritime center. Shipping is part of the city's DNA. If we want to consolidate this position, our government must be more proactive than ever in tackling the issues we are facing, both the institutional weaknesses and the many problems arising from the turbulence that I mentioned. There are at least 2 fundamental institutional weaknesses in the present system. First, sea transport falls within the purview of a policy bureau that covers not only transport but also housing. This is both illogical and impossible to manage. The rationale behind the institutional arrangement of putting a global trading sector under the same ministry as local housing has never been clear. The issues of interest and concern to the transportation industry, in particular the sea transport industry, are very different from those associated with local housing, which is of course another headache in Hong Kong. In addition, the workload for our government officials is simply too heavy and too demanding for anyone to manage successfully. The other institutional weakness is the lack of an independent industry-led body to drive the growth of Hong Kong's maritime and port industries, which are truly global industries. As you all know, our community has been pursuing this for over 2 decades. Regrettably, the government has yet to take our recommendations on board. And whilst we are grateful for the hard work of the many public officers in the Hong Kong Maritime and Port Board, the fact remains that the board is essentially an advisory body. The current turmoil reminds us once again of the inadequacy of the system. There is a lack of sustainability in leadership, there's no autonomy in staff recruitment, and there's little flexibility in the deployment of financial resources. So obviously, there is a pressing need for institutional changes to enable us to creatively focus on the challenges, the needs, and perhaps opportunities from the social unrest, the US-China conflict, and the COVID-19 pandemic. So I appeal for government leadership to make this change in the interest of Hong Kong. The second thing I'd like to appeal for is partnership. We need partnership. We need industry partnership at this most critical time for the global shipping community. In the past few years, the international shipping industry has in fact done a fairly good job of tackling many issues, including environmental issues like ballast water management and the 2020 sulfur cap. But there are more challenges to come, in particular the ambitious long-term targets for reducing and eliminating greenhouse gas emissions. Even more grave, the shipping industry is today facing imminent challenges from the recent turbulence, especially the world's common enemy, the coronavirus. Since February this year, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused huge problems related to crew changes, safe manning, chartering, insurance, classifications and ship surveys and maintenance, among others. Our ships have stopped in ports that are neither effective nor efficient. Our colleagues have come across regulators who are neither friendly nor helpful. Dealing with these problems will require the concerted effort of industry associations throughout the world. There's no room for self-interest or complacency. Indeed, the crew change issue is particularly serious. In the past 8 months, much of the world has pretty much closed down in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And while the great majority of the world's vessels have not been infected by the virus to date, almost 300,000 seafarers are still stranded at sea after completion of their contracts. They are unable to return home to see their families. Many of them are suffering from both physical and mental stress. This is unacceptable. The issue must be addressed for humanitarian reasons, for navigational safety, and for the continued functioning of the world supply chains on which we all depend. So we must work together to help port authorities and government regulators help us. I'm proud that the Hong Kong Shipowners Association has always been an integral part of this industry partnership. We recognize our important role as part of the international community, and we are ready and willing to commit our resources and expertise to this partnership. But just a few active players are not enough. All in all, there is a pressing need for wider participation and contribution by all concerned industry associations at all levels to enable us to stay together and act together. Today, I appeal for industry partnership to find appropriate solutions to the challenges we face in the interest of the global shipping community. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what I ask of you today: government leadership and industry partnership. And for our industry leaders in this forum, I'd like to ask for more. I very much look forward to benefiting from your wisdom and the many inspiring and insightful ideas from your stories and experience. But before I end, I'd like to add fellowship to my list of asks. I suggest that each one of us commit to come together in rejection of nationalism, fascism, and radicalism. It seems we are living in a world that grows more and more polarized with each passing day. A world in which populism rules and facts and truth are being displaced by judgment and fake news. Our world leaders are increasingly strongmen, and their followers increasingly tone deaf. Street riots are commonplace on all continents, and there seems to be very little middle ground. If you are not with me, you are against me, I hear. Not, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to my death your right to say it. Civil discourse is losing the civil part. We can do better than that. As a species, the real challenges we face are pandemics, climate change, learning to coexist with artificial intelligence, and avoidance of nuclear war. These may sound like long-tail risks, but as COVID-19 has shown, black swan events do happen, and it requires cooperation and coordination between nations, between continents, between people and races to mitigate these risks to humanity. Shipping is built on trade and trade on coexistence. And as global nomads in the shipping world, we need to stand up for tolerance, for civil discourse, and for reason. We must reject being taken hostage by either end of this political spectrum, and we must insist on resolving our differences through peaceful dialogue, through fellowship. This is not a job for someone else. This is the responsibility of each one of us every day. There is a real risk that if we don't reject fanatism and radicalism, we will someday pay a dear price for our silence. So in closing, just a friendly reminder, life will not be the same in the new normal. But then, life was never easy. And perhaps the silver lining is that anything born through hardship will have a deeper value than what comes easy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bjorn. Thank you very much for that inspiring and timely keynote address, especially during these critical times that we're facing. We're now going to move on to the panel discussion, which will focus on Hong Kong's maritime future in a post-COVID-19 environment. Moderating the panel is Benjamin Wong. Benjamin is the head of Maritime Cluster at InvestHK, the government department responsible for attracting and facilitating foreign direct investments. Joining Benjamin on the panel is Mr. Richard Hext and Mr. Lianjun. Richard is a non-executive director of Anglo-Eastern Univan Group and of Swires Singapore-based China Navigation Company and is chairman of Vanmar Shipping. He is also a governor of the University of Central Lancashire and a member of the Hong Kong Advisory Board of Stanford University's Graduate School of Business and was recently appointed as chairman of the Hong Kong Maritime Museum. Lianjun is a partner at the leading lawyer of the Transportation and Commercial Litigation Department in Hong Kong at Reed Smith Richards Butler. He qualified as a solicitor in Hong Kong, in England and Wales. We are also happy that Bjorn will join in the discussion too. But before I hand over the floor to Benjamin, a couple of ground rules for our audience. You should have a control panel which pops up on the right of your screen, as you can see here. There are two actions you can take today. first is to ask a question. To do this, you simply need to enter your question at the bottom of the box of the control panel where it says questions. I will receive them, and at the end of the webinar, I will ask the questions on your behalf. The second major action is to collapse the menu by clicking on the little arrow on the top of the control panel. So with that, I'll hand it over to Benjamin. Benjamin.
Thank you, Andrew. It's fantastic to have our panel this morning. And good morning to the panelists, and also a good day to all the audience around the world. Now, I think COVID-19 and also China-US tension, all this actually is being mentioned almost, I think, probably on a daily basis, probably numerous times during the day also. And it's needless to say that the global economy is being affected very badly. The negative impact actually is immense and far-reaching. Now, before I jump into the panel discussion, actually, I would like to share a bit of statistics first. First, iron ore price is been increased by 34% year to date, and actually it has rose over $125 first time since 2014. And on the container side, the Far East to US East Coast 40-feet freight rate actually it has reached over $4,200 a 10 years high also. So it seems like although the global economy is being affected, but for shipping, it isn't as badly as other people has thought. Now, actually, my question to the panelists actually is it true that actually shipping is doing relatively better than the other industry? And what's your view on that? Now, I'll give Bjorn a break first. I'll start with Richard. Richard, please.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Benjamin. I think you have to look sector by sector. The two sectors that I'm most interested in are bulk and liner. And yes, you're quite right that the bulk freight rates have been picking up quite substantially in the past few weeks. And I think that's partly a result of suppressed demand when ports were closed and inventories were building up that are now going back to sea. It's partly a result of the suppressed supply outlook that we've seen in the order book, perhaps most visibly. And then on the liner side, I'm involved with a smaller operator, but you can look at Maersk's recent release. I think it suggests to me that the liner players have done a very good job of managing capacity. In other words, they've held back capacity despite the downturn in volumes, because I think the evidence is that the volumes being shipped are down. So I think it's a sector by sector story, Benjamin. And looking forward, the hardest thing is the sheer uncertainty of which wave we're in now and how many more waves there are to go in terms of how that will develop.
Thank you, Richard. It's very true, because I think the freight rate actually is only part of the story. Also, the volume, which the whole shipping industry is moving, is another factor we should look at, because small volume, high freight rate actually may not be as ideal as over high. Bjorn, what's your view on that?
Well, I think if you look at this from a macro perspective, that what this pandemic has shown is that even though many industries have shut down, then shipping, as the world's truly unique supply chain, has kept going. I mean, freight volumes are not down by the same amounts of GDP even in most countries. We are shutting down service industries, we are shutting down tourism, we are shutting down hospitality businesses, restaurants, etc. worldwide. But shipping is what gives all of us energy, food, medical supplies, etc. And that's needed, pandemic or not. So in many ways, shipping is exceptionally resilient. And I think this pandemic has shown how important it is to the world and to pull through this crisis. So yeah, I would say that macro-wise, we should perhaps be grateful to be in shipping, because we are not seeing the same disruption as airlines or some parts of shipping like cruise liners or tourism, etc.
Right. Thank you, Bjorn. Now, Lianjun, actually, I would like to jump to you and also on the a bit on the legal side, because I think with the COVID-19 kicked in early in the year, actually we saw a lot of vessels not being able to discharge their cargo, and also there were port closure, and then we've got the issue with the crew that some are actually being stuck on board even though their contract period is over. While some other crew, they're actually stuck on shore, even though their contract should have already started on board. So now, for you, what have you seen in terms of the legal fiasco, which is has been going on? What are the legal side, which are the most important that we have to take care of during this pandemic period?
Thank you, Benjamin. Good morning to everyone. Firstly, I would like to say I thank Marine Money and Benjamin's invitation to this panel. And since January or February, maritime lawyers are pretty busy. The reason is, one is we are dealing with, as you said, the delay in loading, discharging, and force majeure event, and a lot of delays, and also crew issues, as Bjorn also mentioned, because the crew was not able to get off the vessel, a lot of issues. Recently, we have one casualty and a simple collision, and the crew has been working on board for 13 months, and the people are very tired after discharging, and the vessel was going to the loading port. You know, in the current situation, the port facilities, everything make a crew very tired during the discharging. So there was a collision with a fishing vessel, 14 people missing. Simply, you know, the crew's negligence, one part of the reason, but it's really, you know, the crew is too tired, and it's difficult to change the crew. So that's caused in the maritime legal services very demanding. So we have to answer all the questions, and also on the drafting side, and new charter party clauses to deal with the Kuwait situation. In Hong Kong, of course, we have very good, you know, law firms in specializing in shipping. We have been working with like Shipowner Association on the legal issues. We had seminar, and yes, it's a challenging time. And I would add that Hong Kong, because our topic is Hong Kong future, maritime future, and Hong Kong is very well positioned to serve the shipping industry on maritime law arbitration. Last year, the Hong Kong Maritime Group was formally set up by a few of the very distinguished arbitrators and lawyers. Hopefully, we can better serve the shipping industry. Thank you.
Benjamin.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add something to Lianjun's excellent remarks. And I think it's just to underline a point that Bjorn made, that you know, essentially people are still being fed, clothed, and kept warm or cool, depending on their climate, because of shipping. And
yes,
that this extraordinary human cost of the seafarers, of the stress on board that they're bearing because they're away from their families, and their families might be in a village somewhere which has been hit hard by COVID. And that, you know, Bjorn has been very vocal about that as the Hong Kong Shipowners Association. You know, we in the shipping community must do as much as we can to persuade governments to make it as easy as possible to change crews. Because if the world starts running out of food, clothing, or power the source of power, then we're in real trouble. But I think I can't underline strongly enough this debt that we owe to the seafarers on board the ships.
Thanks, Lianjun and Richard. I totally agree. Once I made a comment on the shipping, probably is the most people-oriented industry around the world. A lot of people management, because we've got so many seafarers at sea, and they are facing the risk at sea every day. And of course, being stuck at sea on board over the contract period actually is no good for the mental side and also in terms of work efficiency. So I hope this will be resolved soon. And for the COVID-19 period, actually, I think for China, for Hong Kong, actually, we were being hit by the pandemic the earliest. So actually, I think we would have more experiences in terms of how to deal with the situation on the shipping side and also on the legal disputes. So I think this could be a good example to learn. Now, zooming in a little bit. Now, I think for this period, a lot of people, all the people actually have been enjoying the blue sky, the very clear sky. I think everybody would agree that is mainly because of the slowdown or stoppage of the economic activities, especially manufacturing and all. Now, I think for the past month or so, actually, I think at least in Hong Kong, we see that the regional activity on the manufacturing has resumed. Actually, if you zoom into China, for the PMI in China for the past 3 months from June to August, actually it's been around the 51 range. Comparing to February, it was only at 35. So it's a big jump in terms of the PMI. Thus, of course, the manufacturing activities. Now, there is this, actually this figure tallies with the iron ore price, which I mentioned, because the iron ore price partly is being increased by the very strong import growth of China on iron ore. And then you actually further tally with the economists. They have made a forecast, a chart, which I have just read actually this morning. So I haven't got time to prepare a slide for that. But maybe I can try to show it here. Now, I don't know whether you can see that. Now, it is a forecast on the 20 economists. And then on the blue dot actually is the forecast made before the coronavirus. And then the red dots, they're actually forecast made by the economist last month, mid-August. Now you can see that in general, for all the economies, it's been a drop, right? If you look at that, the biggest drop actually would be India, from the original positive about 6% drop to about a negative 8 or 9%. And then for the most of the economy, actually the drop is about from plus 2% to the range of 10%. Whereas for China, it is being named as an outlier by the economist, which the drop is from about 6% to about 2%. So from all these 20 economists, China is an outlier, which is not going to contract the economy this year. Now, another one which is worth mentioning is South Korea. You can see that in the blue box at the end of the chart, the blue box, it is the forecast of when the economy will be returning back to the 2019 level. And South Korea on the chart, actually with the date forecasted, is being forecasted to be returned to 2019 level by 2021. So it's actually very early. Now, my question to you is, now with all these figures, that it seems like China economy, Asian economy probably will be rebounding back faster than the Western economy. And especially China, that actually the GDP is still on a positive growth. Now, would you be agree with the saying that giving the figure, actually you could kind of like bet on the Asian economy, bet on the Asian market and also China market, and focus a bit more for the shipping market in the next few years to tie that in, because the forecast is, according to this article, is that the first batch of economies being rebound back is Asian, and then G7, and then the developing countries. So do you think this sequence would help for the shipping industry to plan for the next few, or maybe few to 10 years? Maybe this time I'll start with also Richard.
Yeah, thank you very much, Benjamin. Yes, well, clearly, again, for dry bulk in particular, it's very much a China story. So a very large percentage of total dry bulk demand is generated by China. China is now the largest builder of ships. China is one of the world's largest suppliers of seafarers. So the China situation really, really matters for shipping. And I looked at that table in The Economist too, actually a few days ago. And as you say, you know, China came down from a forecast of something like 6% pre-coronavirus to about 1% now. And the US has come down from about 2.5% down to about -5%, -5.5%. And you've got some economies, I remember the Spanish economy is at about -12.6% forecast for the year. And the Italians are a bit better than Italy is a bit better than Spain, and France is a bit better than Italy. But China at the moment, from these forecasts, is well ahead of the rest of the global economy, and clearly, given the importance of China for dry bulk shipping, that's relatively encouraging. I mean, I'm sure those of us who live in Hong Kong, that's not people outside Hong Kong, would have seen the picture of in the newspaper in Hong Kong of 250 million school children all starting back at school a day or two ago without masks and without social distancing. So that has quite a ripple effect through society. And I suspect China will keep the borders closed for a bit longer, hopefully not towards Hong Kong, but you know, for their own, a lot of their demand now is internally generated rather than being based on overseas trade. And so I suspect they'll want to protect the internal health in order to drive that internal economic activity. But obviously for economies that are very dependent on tourism and people traveling in, it's quite a worry. Perhaps I'll leave it to another panelist from here.
Right, thank you. Bjorn, what's your view on that?
Well, I think it's very positive to see that China is not contracting. I'm not expected to contract this year. You know, China is the world's second largest economy, so it's an important locomotive for the global outlook and for shipping in particular, as Richard points out. As a ship manager, you know, 2020 has been a year marked by much less churn than we're used to. I mean, we can see that ship owners buy and sell much less actively than they used to. We don't see a lot of ships leaving the fleet because they've been sold. We don't see a lot of ships coming into the fleet because they've been bought. I think many people today take a bit of a wait and see approach. The future is opaque in terms of economic growth, and there's also the whole issue of technology and greenhouse gas emissions and obsolescence in terms of technical standards in the ships. So, you know, the old saying goes like you should be bullish when others are fearful, and vice versa. Maybe this is a good time to invest in ships because everyone seems to be holding back, and that's normally a precursor to a bull market for shipping.
Fantastic. I see the crystal ball is kicking in now. Lianjun, actually, this question, I think it would be very relevant to you because I think among four of us, actually, you are the only one which who has lived in both mainland China and Hong Kong and also overseas. Now, what's your view on that in terms of the question I just asked, that it seems like the China and Asian group is very strong, then would it be a good bet from your experience in the industry, that for the industry to participate or to focus a bit more on the Asian China shipping market?
Yes, I have been in Hong Kong for 26 years. And of course, I was growing up in China and then went to Sweden for 4 years. My contacts, of course, many contacts in the mainland, and I have a daily contact, clients, friends. It's really now China is back to full capacity from school, manufacturing, and everything. People have been meeting. I think the growth is still there. However, for the international trade, now yesterday I spoke with a few shipyards. I thought they were busy, but they told me it's not what I thought at the beginning of this year or last year on the installing scrubbers. The shipyards, repair yards are very busy. Now, really people are waiting for the orders from the shipbuilding industry, of course. But from the export side, my wife works at the Hutchison. So she told me liner part is very busy export from China. The freights are increasing to Europe or the US. It's good market, and I have clients for the tanker like China Merchants and China COSCO Shipping Energy. They got very, very good result for this year. So really, as far as our maritime law industry, in Hong Kong's position point of view, we are still good to serve shipping industry, including the mainland clients. As I think other two speakers said, China is special. Hong Kong is, again, challenges, but there's special position. It's the only common law jurisdiction in China, and a lot of companies, including our clients, choose Hong Kong for the legal services. For me, I'm benefiting from those. Thank you.
Thank you, Lianjun. Now, after zooming into China, I think now this is a Hong Kong-centric panel, so of course I need to zoom into Hong Kong also. Now, it's been a very tough 20 months for Hong Kong. Early last year, 2019, actually, we started with the China-US trade war, and then of course big effect on the trading volume and the pattern. And then the second half of the year, then we got hit with the social unrest. And for those people that they plan to travel or already traveled to Hong Kong, of course, I think you'll see the big disruption. And then 2020, we started with COVID-19. And then for last month, we got hit also with the USA suspension or termination of the tax exemption on the shipping income. So we've got a lot of happenings over here in Hong Kong. Now, for the panel discussion so far, actually it's been quite positive, even though we've got a backdrop of the global events. But now for Hong Kong, actually, I would like to ask the panelists with the what's happening with Hong Kong for the past 20 months. What's your view for the Hong Kong market? And now, do you see that we are having, or we will need to have a change on the trading pattern or new markets We've talked about the Belt and Road a lot in Hong Kong or in the region, a lot Belt and Road and also Greater Bay Area. And also in terms of Hong Kong's strengths, now we are very strong on the intangible industries, financial services, Lianjun in the legal side, insurance, and then for the shipping industry, should we be steering ourselves to more of that? Because now, of course, ship owning itself, it basically is a asset investment, asset management, and then we've got a lot of people-oriented gravity in terms of the ship management. So what's your view that what do we need to do more in terms of dealing with all these impacts? Maybe I will start with Bjorn this time.
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin. I think I touched upon this in my remarks at the opening here. Firstly, I think we would be foolish to underestimate the challenges that Hong Kong is facing. I think they are significant, and they are very clearly felt for us living and working in Hong Kong. But I think it would also be remiss of us to write Hong Kong off. I mean, I've lived here long enough to see Hong Kong bounce back many times before. And I think Hong Kong has a number of very unique strengths that may see the city ultimately prosper from the adjustments the world is going through. You know, about 20 years ago, when China became member of WTO, the global supply chains were wired for a US-China manufacturing sales channel, and through the last 20 years, the world has benefited from that arbitrage done between the West and China. I think some of the adjustments we are going through right now will lead to a more multifaceted picture going forward. In a way, you can say we are rewiring the global supply chain. I think countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, India will play a bigger part in the global manufacturing base going forward. And there are clearly some pains and adjustments for us all to go through. But shipping was a huge beneficiary of let's say, the first 5 years of the global wiring of the supply chain back in 2001 to 2006-07. And I think shipping and Hong Kong's role as a shipping center could very well, you know, blossom in the next 5 years as we see this rewiring taking place. So whereas as I said, I don't think we should underestimate the challenges facing Hong Kong. I think there's also a reason for optimism. Hong Kong has got some unique strengths, and depending on how this all plays out, we may actually see Hong Kong grow and win ultimately in this development.
Thank you, Bjorn. Yes, I do agree because I think the change actually is very much needed. And I think actually Hong Kong is also quite good at managing the change. I think one very good example is when China was opening up the economy, the light industry was all relocated into mainland China. And then at that time, of course, all the factory workers, then they would be unemployed. But then Hong Kong, we changed it to a more service-oriented industry. And I think actually for that is actually a very good lesson for us to learn. Now, Richard, what's your view on that?
Yes, well, thank you very much, Ben. I think at the moment, if we're talking about global trading patterns, but first of all, like Bjorn, I'm not as pessimistic as some people. I continue to be optimistic about Hong Kong. But I must say, what I'd say is the noise to signal ratio is currently extremely high. There's a huge amount of noise out there, and I'm waiting eagerly to hear what Lianjun has to tell us about his thoughts on the reciprocal tax issue between Hong Kong and the US in the shipping area. I mean, that's one area where there's a lot of noise at the moment. I do think that regional trade will be encouraged more and more, but I don't think that the big intercontinental trades between Asia and the US and Asia and Europe are going to disappear. We may see a softening of growth rates, but I do think we'll get a spur in regional trades that might substitute some of the growth we might have seen on the intercontinental front. So yeah, I think that's what I'd like to say for now, Ben.
Thank you. Yes, for all the cargoes moving around the world, they have to be moved, and the need for demand for a different kind of a commodity of all industry of all countries, actually it will be there. It's just a matter of the pattern and trading routes. Now, Lianjun, actually, Richard has asked a question on the tax exemption between US Hong Kong on the shipping income. Now, maybe I'll get you to say something about that first.
Yes, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Benjamin. We have good news and we have bad news. The good news, I say the good news first. And as you know, we just passed the leasing tax concession legislation. And in the past, ship owner using 23B, the revenue law, and international shipping income, hire and freight are not taxable in Hong Kong for the Hong Kong companies. Now, what about the pure leasing company? Like financial banks, they only do leasing. So there was a concern since 2016. Now the new law passed. If you are doing purely shipping in Hong Kong, if you central management in Hong Kong, and then you are tax-free for the leasing income. Of course, there are thresholds. One is you have 2 employees at least in Hong Kong, management in Hong Kong, and then you have expenditure 7.8 million Hong Kong dollars, including the interest rate. So the financial companies, they set up, you finance the vessel, you leasing out, it's clearly there's no tax if you feel satisfied. Then for the managers, as again good news, for the leasing managers, if they managing independently for other companies, it's 8.25, half normal interest rate. And for the managing their own vessels, there's no tax. So basically, it's very good for the financers. As you know, from mainland China, there are a few leasing companies here. They are not operating formally, they simply raising finance. That will attract more leasing companies to Hong Kong, enjoy the tax recessions. Now, the US and Hong Kong, the US government has recently announced they will suspend or terminate the US Hong Kong reciprocal tax arrangement. So in the past, if it's Hong Kong owners, you earn the freight coming and go to Hong Kong or to the US, you will be exempt from the tax. The US tax on freight is 4%, and if you normally charge half, 2%. Now, after the suspension, then Hong Kong owners, if you go, say, load the cargo, Hong Kong owners, if you go to US, pick up the cargo, or deliver, potentially you will have 2%. The freight income will be taxable in the US. So that's to the Hong Kong owners, they have to consider the tax plan. Of course, tax always complicates the issue. So that will cause Hong Kong owners, for the companies, some concern. Hopefully, the dialogue will be continued, in particular China and the US, and hopefully that can be resolved in the future. because internationally, like other countries, even US and China, there's tax treaty. So I think there is prospect to negotiate in the future. Of course, that's for the Hong Kong owners. You will immediately face the issue with the US. Of course, if you are not trading with the US, not going there, pick up cargo, or discharging, there's no impact. I hope this helps.
Thank you, Lianjun. Actually, you have paved the way for me to move on to the topic of looking ahead. The ship leasing is one regime that the Hong Kong government has already passed the legislative process and actually is effective now already. Our forecast for that is, or our hope is that in 10 years' time, we will be able to capture about 12% of the global leasing market. So that's, let's see in 10 years' time. Now, for the rest, actually, now looking ahead, what Hong Kong should be focusing on. I think besides on the ship financing side, ship leasing side, technology would be one thing because obviously is one of the hottest topic and investment area these days. For the shipping side, then actually we've got IMO 2020 and then the greenhouse emission requirements 2050. Actually, we should be looking at it already. So the green technology, green fuel, and crew management is one area which we for sure will need to take a very good look at how we could make use of the technology to make the crew life easier and better on board, and also in terms of how to make the crew management more efficient. And then of course there could be communication, navigation. Now on that, maybe I would like to start with Richard first. Now I think you are also a CEO for a internet startup Level C's. So I think I mentioned different areas, but your viewpoint on the shipping technology, what's your view on that?
I think my view on shipping technology is that, as we've seen Apple pass $2 trillion of market capitalization. There's been a realization that non-physical touch companies, if I could characterize Apple a bit that way, have a huge amount of potential value in an environment where physical touch is an issue. And so I think the technologies that will make shipping more efficient, the adoption rate for those technologies will increase significantly because of the COVID crisis, because we can see the value of the tech companies, and there will be more investment in tech companies, and so on. You characterize this session, Benjamin, as looking forward. I did just want to say one area where I sort of rather disagreed with Bjorn. I hope you won't mind. I don't agree that COVID-19 is a black swan event insofar as it was anticipated by several major governments. They just didn't do anything about it. The black swan, I think, normally is something that's completely out of the blue and completely unanticipated. Anyone who's watched Bill Gates's TED talk of a few years ago will know that this was something that the world saw coming but did nothing about. And my sort of plug here is that with climate change now obviously sort of stepping up, I don't have to quote all the examples. It's so important for the shipping industry to take seriously the need to address our carbon emissions in particular well before the IMO date of 2050. We've also seen in the last few months an increasing focus by investors on ESG issues. So I'm hoping that shipping companies not only look green, increasingly green, but do become increasingly green. And of course, the millennial generation want to work for companies that take the environmental issue seriously. If I can plug the Maritime Museum, we're opening a marine science center next year, because we see this as one of the big priorities. That in conjunction with the Hong Kong shipping community, this is something we take very, very seriously. Green business is good business, is the plug, and I very much hope to conclude that remark that the shipping community takes the COVID-19 as the sort of the shock that says let's head off a coming big shock that might come from climate change.
Thank you, Richard. It's a very good looking ahead comments because I think it includes also the people, the talent side. Bjorn, now your view on that technology, and actually Richard mentioned about also the talents. I think we've been on different occasions, and I know you have a lot to say about technology and also people.
Thanks, Ben. Technology, I think the biggest revolution we are going to see technology-wise is in connectivity. I mean, when I went to sea back in the late 80s, I would get real letters delivered 6 to 8 weeks after they were written somewhere. And a few years later, we had the first Inmarsat satellites, and we could start sending faxes back home as seafarers on board. And there's been a lot of development in connectivity, but the reality is that it's still very expensive and it's still very slow. In the next 2 or 3 years, companies like Starlink are going to launch networks of low Earth orbiting satellites. I mean, Elon Musk alone will orbit 12,000 satellites. And that's going to be a game changer for not just shipping, but for also, you know, remote areas in continents that are unreachable connectivity-wise today. It's going to mean that we're going to replace this straw through which we've been exchanging information very expensively with the ships with a fire hose of information. I mean, I understand that we're talking 600 megabits per second at something like $80 per month, which is you know, a magnitude, an order of magnitude difference than today. And I think that's really going to change the, you know, all the associated technology issues around shipping, because the one thing that drives these technology is connectivity. And if we have, if we can consider a ship, you know, like we consider any other office in New York, in London, in Hong Kong, being absolutely hooked into the cloud and with Internet of Things developing, I think that's going to be a real game changer for shipping. Also, in pursuit of some of these ambitions around climate change, around crew welfare, etc., that Richard was talking about.
Thank you, Bjorn.
Well said. Well said.
Yes, it's fantastic. And I think it's also part of the seafarers' experience on sea also. I think we have a lot of talks about the seafarers. We need to get them connected. So this is fantastic. Now, I have my last question actually is more to Lianjun, which is on the legal arbitration side, because I think that is also one segment which Hong Kong should look ahead to. And we've got some headway on that. And I would like to have Lianjun to have some comments on that. I think for arbitration now, I think last year we've got this arrangement with mainland China on these interim measures. And then also BIMCO also has named Hong Kong as the 4th arbitration place in their documents. So Lianjun, could you comment a bit on that?
Yes, I think the Maritime Legal Services side, Hong Kong, really well positioned. One, as you mentioned, BIMCO will name Hong Kong as one of the 4 dispute resolution center: London, New York, Singapore, and Hong Kong. It's very good to put the name in the paper. And secondly, Hong Kong and mainland has entered an agreement. And if the arbitration in Hong Kong by the institutions, 6 institutions. For the companies in the mainland, you can apply to the mainland Chinese court for we call freezing order or attachment. You get security. You apply the court there, freezing the account or get the security, then you arbitrate in Hong Kong. Mainland so far is only the Hong Kong, that's the only place for getting this kind of security in the out of mainland. I.e., if you choose Hong Kong arbitration, the opponents are in the mainland, you want to apply freezing order, and that's allowed. You can do that. In comparison with other jurisdictions, there's no such arrangement. That's very good for Hong Kong arbitration. And and for the Greater Bay Areas, I just read the news, 3 authorities, so mainland, Macau, Hong Kong, recently had entered into agreement to cooperate monitoring or coordinating all the cooperation in the Greater Bay Areas. That will, again, for the maritime legal services, it's a good chance. And also, now mainland, the Greater Bay Areas allow Hong Kong lawyers to be qualified in the mainland. So that gave Hong Kong lawyers an opportunity to practice in mainland, get more opportunities. That's the only place allowed non-mainland Chinese can practice in the mainland. So that's the new areas. It's good for Hong Kong and also good for maritime arbitration and legal service. I also add, say Hong Kong is still, we believe, still is good place for the maritime legal service. We have first-class maritime law firms, ship managers, ship owning, brokers, and 12 of 13 international P&I clubs. They have offices in Hong Kong. But really, Hong Kong can provide all-around services. And the legal system still here. Thank you, Vanmar. Yeah.
Thank you, Lianjun. It's a very good conclusion for our panel because actually it also is in line with the composition of the panel over here. We've got Bjorn and also Richard from Europe, you from mainland China, I'm from Hong Kong. So actually the talent pool over here in Hong Kong is actually very mixed up with different people, different culture, and different experiences. Now, I think I'll conclude my panel discussion over here. And then I'll hand it over back to Andrew. I don't know whether there is any Q&A questions being raised by the audience.
Thank you, Benjamin, Bjorn, Richard, and Lianjun for that interesting discussion. You've covered a lot of ground in the last hour with strong insights into the current and forecasted maritime environment, both in Hong Kong and around the world. We've had numerous questions coming in, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to ask 2 or 3 questions, and I would appreciate if your answers are quite short. So the first question is related to a comment that was made earlier about the domestic Chinese market. The question is, COVID-19 is making countries think that external overdependence is not good for them. Will this result in globalization and move towards regionalization? If yes, how will this affect the ton miles and hence demand for shipping? Perhaps Richard can answer that one.
Yeah, I think The Economist came up with the term globalization, yeah, there are different scenarios. I mean, no doubt that is one of them, that we will see a reduction in transcontinental trade. I'm a bit more optimistic. I think that we will sort of find our way through these issues. I won't pretend to know the outcome of the US election, but I think that'll have an impact on things. You asked me to keep it short, Andrew, so that's all I'll say for now.
All right, thanks, Richard. Another question directed to Bjorn. As the chairman of the Hong Kong Shipowners Association and the Hong Kong Shipowners Association as a progressive association, what leadership role can the HKSOA take to guide or motivate Hong Kong owners to come under the umbrella of the Poseidon principles and implementing the pillars of ESG?
Yeah, so I mean, Hong Kong SOA is a members association, right? And we have a wide and diverse membership. So it's one of those issues where I think there's not a single voice of Hong Kong owners. It's up to individual owners to decide their own pace and interest in these initiatives. What we will do is to support all our members in engagement with government, with other associations, with the international community, in making sure that we have access and understand the programs on which we can attach ourselves. So I think there's not a one size fits all for Hong Kong owners in that respect, and Hong Kong SOA will simply be an aid to individual members rather than taking an overall position on it.
Thank you, Bjorn. And one final question. I mean, at Marine Money, we focus on shipping finance in particular, and Hong Kong, as compared to London and New York, is one of the major financial hubs in the world, and more recently, focusing on technology companies and focusing on mainland Chinese companies listing on the Hong Kong capital markets. The question is, do you see Hong Kong developing more into a key financial center for shipping, with more banks, lease companies, and alternative finance providers servicing global shipping? Benjamin, perhaps?
Right. Yes. Actually, I think now the leasing scheme is one item that we are doing now because we think that as a financial center that we need to have different alternatives for ship owners and the industry to raise funds. So ship leasing is one. And I think that would also help to bring leasing houses and also ship financing banks into Hong Kong. And of course, now we have quite a number of leasing houses, lessors. They have been already using the platform. So I think this momentum will continue.
Thank you very much, Ben. So that's all we have time for this morning, for this session. Thank you, gentlemen, for that interesting discussion and for being with us today. For those of you listening in, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website later today or tomorrow. We will send a follow-up email tomorrow with some contact details. So if your question wasn't answered today, you can follow up with our speakers tomorrow. Please note that our next session, session 2, which will focus on container shipping, and we'll be discussing with 4 of the largest and most active Hong Kong ship owning companies, will be up next at 1 p.m. Hong Kong time. So please be sure to register and join us for that. The link is on our website. Thank you all again for tuning in to session 1 of our virtual Marine Money Hong Kong Ship Finance Forum. This is your host, Andrew Oates from Marine Money, signing out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.